virus continues to spread, so does fear.
Stay home.
Shelter in place.
Locking down is not only the only tool, it's the best tool.
The public did not know that there were prominent scientists that disagreed with the lockdown policies.
Across the country, 2,200 cases.
That number's going to skyrocket.
This is moving very fast.
The federal government was regularly censoring dissenting opinions.
They wanted to create an illusion of consensus.
This hurt a lot of people.
We're being told not to contradict any kind of public health orders at the risk of losing our license.
Suddenly, just boom, you're fired and no explanation.
I'm giving you 90 days notice of termination between the health authority and yourself.
This goes all the way back to January 2020.
About 3.4% of reported COVID-19 cases have died.
I knew immediately that was a vast exaggeration.
It was starting to look more and more like we had misunderstood what the infection fatality rate was going to look like.
If you're going to make a case for lockdown, you absolutely need to know how widespread the disease is and how deadly it is.
I was asked to be an advisor to the president during the biggest healthcare crisis in a century. Fauci, the task force, were instilling panic in the public instead of articulating the data.
The entire world, country after country, copied what China had done. Absolutely insane.
This was shocking to me in a free society to simply decree the lockdowns.
We wanted to tell the world that there was an alternate view that prominent scientists had.
A group of more than 40 epidemiologists and public health scientists reject closing economies.
The National Institute of Health called for a devastating publish takedown, engaged the press in mere jobs and hit pieces.
The federal government was working with Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all of them, to be able to manipulate the public.
Musk has released an incriminating stream of internal documents.
It's just the most damning discovery.
Twitter said they don't want people to hear what I said.
I was blacklisted the day I joined Twitter.
The Stanford professor physician who specializes in this stuff seems like he'd be the last person we'd censor, correct?
At the highest levels, people that we've trusted to be knowledgeable are not. They're simply not.
The COVID lockdowns caused catastrophic damage to the world.
Breaking overdose numbers, the rise in suicide
Rates of depression way up among children.
This is from the isolation of the lockdowns. This has nothing to do with the virus itself.
We became focused on the prevention of a single threat, and as a result, we threw away everything else that we might care about.
19-year-old Kai Matthews needed the ER right away.
We were denied treatment because of COVID.
They said we can't chance COVID exposure at the hospital.
Several hours later, Kai passed away from meningitis B.
Are we a society that sacrifices our children?
This whole lockdown philosophy makes us fundamentally change our civilizations. And it will come back over and over again unless we as a society decide that we do not want to live this way.
Wow.
Both of us with tears in our eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It never gets easier listening about this stuff. And this is why we do what we do. And I got to say, like, if you're going to do media, do it well. And we have been privileged enough to interview people like Todd Michael Harris, who does it well. If nothing else, this whole thing has produced a lot of people who are dedicated to getting the truth out there and doing it well. Because if you don't do it well, the credibility is in question, usually. Today we have a filmmaker that we are extremely excited about. This is Vanessa Dylyn, who created COVID Collateral, as well as many other people. And we're still trying to recover here from
When you talk about kids dying, it hits us. We're both parents.
Every time.
And we both got into this fight and telling truth because of our parental roles and our dedication to the future for our children. So it strikes a nerve every time.
Yeah, we can usually hold it together unless we look at each other and then
then we're done.
So Vanessa Dylyn, Vanessa Dylyn is a filmmaker, and holy cow, her bio is amazing. So recent documentaries, her recent documentary credits include Into the Inferno with Werner Hertzog, and that right there, going into production with Werner Hertzog takes a lot of courage, because that man is an uber perfectionist, and it turns out high quality work every time. Her other credits include The Musical Brain featuring Sting, Feist, Michael Bublé, Fixing My Brain, The Divided Brain, which all are amazingly interesting looking documentaries. We haven't seen them yet, but I'm certainly going to check them out. Undercover Jihadi, which she produced for TVO, A Woman Who Joined the Taliban, produced for CBC, Leslie Caron, The Reluctant Star, The Mystery of San Nicardino, Durno, and then currently producing new upcoming credits include Marco Polo Reach America, Beast Hunters of Rome, Arctic Vets, Charles Dickens, and The House of Fallen Women. Sorry, I butchered most of those, but again, I will recover, and we'll get back on this. And not only that, Vanessa speaks 3 languages, including Italian, French, and English, which is amazing to me. I speak one language and not even that well. Yeah, that's it. It was a 1-pager and I didn't even get through it. So without further ado, we are so excited for this guest. Vanessa, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for that wonderful intro. I have to live up to it now.
Well, so far, no problem. So
actually, I was quite fortunate because I've been working on, at the same time that I was working on COVID Collateral, I was working on Plastic People, which is a film that's for TELUS. And I was working on that with White Pine Pictures. I was the creative producer on that film, and that film was invited to compete at South by Southwest, a big international festival in Austin. And we've been getting tremendous press on that. New York Times, Variety. So that's been just wonderful, and I'm hoping the excitement will spill over into COVID Collateral.
Yes. So, well, how have you found the reception so far with COVID Collateral?
Well, we have not released it yet. So the screening in Toronto is the first premiere.
Okay.
But unlike all of my other films, we've had great challenges with this film. That is, when I first pitched the idea of the suppression of science and the dissenting opinions from major scientists against lockdowns, when I first pitched that to broadcasters across Canada, I would like to say they were quietly appalled. Now, I have a background as a filmmaker. They know who I am, so there was a rather polite silence. One broadcaster was hostile, but not to me directly, but to someone who was part of my creative team at the time. But I found a tremendous amount of hostility towards this film in the last 2 years within my own industry. So it has been. I'm going to be very frank about that. So it's been a huge challenge. Even business people, even trying to hire a business affairs person who knew me, they'd say, "Oh, great," and then they would read up on it, and they would say, "Whoa, this isn't for me." Even a closed captioning technician.
Wow.
Out. That's the kind of stuff we have been getting, but I know we've got a really good film. I know we have a film that really speaks to the importance of science, the importance of data, the importance of facts.
Mm-hmm.
And the film's big question is, what happens when science is censored in a free society?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at the dissenting voices. We look at major scientists who are well known in their fields, like Dr. Scott Atlas, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, commentators like Jeffrey Tucker, Michael Senger, all of these people who had dissenting opinions against lockdowns, and who suspected that the lab came from that the virus came from a lab, not a natural animal origin. So the film, we construct the entire film through the theme of the suppression of science, through these two major storylines, lockdowns. How did lockdowns happen?
Mm-hmm.
What's the behind the scenes story? Who made the decision to lock down, which affected not just one country, but worldwide?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the origin of COVID?
Mm-hmm.
We're 4 years in. No one is definitively saying this is not of natural origin. So we look at the suppression of science through those two storylines, and we have top experts.
So for me, this brings up a really interesting point. So we are very adamant that we don't do left-wing, right-wing stuff here. We are not about division at all. Everybody has their opinions, and that's fine. But it brings up a very interesting point, because you've worked with the CBC, which is predominantly known as a left-wing organization. And then this whole idea that science was censored and shenanigans happened, that seems to be poised as a right-wing centered ideal. So for you, was it a wake-up call? Like, if you, as a pursuer of the truth, did you know about all this stuff? Like, were you awake to this stuff before any of this happened?
Right from day one, because the films that I have tended to make for, let's say, our lefty broadcasters in Canada or the lefty broadcasters in Europe have been, in a sense, politics free. They have not, it hasn't been a question of right and left. This is really, I would say, probably the only one. I mean, the only one where people's backs really got up just by my actually questioning what happened. So my film is, and this is why in my industry there was quiet hostility, or there was silence against this, because I work in a very left-wing dominant industry. And myself, I tend to be in the middle. I tend to be a fiscal conservative, but I am motivated by truth. What are the facts? What's the truth? I don't care whose mouth it's coming from. So this film is really, we had to be scrupulous in this film about making sure that it would pitch to the movable middle, meaning that we could engage left of center, thoughtful left of center people, thoughtful right of center people. This film is not going to satisfy anyone at either extreme end.
Right.
But it's going to be an intelligent discussion, I think, for the general public.
Brilliant.
Especially parents also.
Yes.
Right.
The funny thing is we talk about right and left politics, but in the case of COVID, right and left were basically doing the same thing and on par with each other. Until probably 2-3 years ago. Now I know here in Canada, we're starting to see more and more conservative politicians speak out, or feeling brave enough to speak out a little bit, and meeting with the scientists and the doctors that were screaming right at the beginning that this was incredibly wrong what they were doing. So we're starting to see a little bit more melting, shall we say. with regards towards the science and doctors speaking out. But at the beginning, they were right on par with each other. They were not divided in their thinking, which is interesting.
That's right. And I think, I mean, to be fair to politicians aren't scientists. They're going to take their marching orders from their chief medical officer. And if the chief medical officer of Canada says, this is what you've got to do, you've got to lock down, you've got to follow these COVID protocols, what's a politician going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the interesting thing you saying that is, you know, it came out later on, but in the last year, Dina Henshaw, who was the public health officer for Alberta, said she got her marching orders from the politicians, not from the doctors, not from the scientists, but from the politicians. Hence the reason why Alberta right now is in extreme strife and civil litigations with regards to all the tickets and charges that they laid.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Now, you mentioned that the climate about this has changed. There is some melting. I think people are starting to wake up. I think the general public has been hearing enough in the media about these censored views, and the people in our film, such as Jay Bhattacharya, Scott Atlas. From the time we started the film, they have been all over the media, and they have become champions of the importance of facts, the importance of hearing from dissenting scientists, and again this kind of melting of views was shown right at the top by Dr. Francis Collins, who recently retired as the head of the National Institutes of Health. And what he said in a podcast was very revealing. And maybe he said it because he's retired now.
Right.
But what he said essentially, and we have a slight quote in our film at the end, we end the film with his quote. What he said is, okay, if you're a public health person, you have this narrow view. You have to save lives, and you have to save lives at the expense of everything else.
Right.
At the expense of the kids losing time in school, at the expense of bankruptcy, suicide, social upheaval, he said. And he said that mindset is unfortunate. He said, and a lot of us had that mindset. And he said they really hadn't, I mean, it was a heartfelt confession, and it was big of him to actually admit this now. But what he was saying is the public health people at the very top really weren't taking into consideration people outside of the big urban centers. They weren't taking into consideration anyone outside of the laptop class who could stay at home, get paid by the government, get paid by whatever institution. They weren't really looking at the people who actually had to show up at work to get paid.
Right.
They weren't looking at all of the, and I'm talking pre-vaccine here.
Right.
They weren't looking at all of the truck drivers that were distributing goods across borders, across states, across Canada. So that people in our grocery stores could show up and stock shelves, so that we could go shopping. They weren't looking at all those people that worked in warehouses,
right,
so that we could order our nice Amazon packages. They weren't looking at the people that showed up in kitchens to cook, so that we could do takeout, so that we didn't have to dirty our be exposed to pathogens outside the restaurant.
Yes.
There was an entire class of people that bore, I believe, and we talk about this in the film, that bore the brunt of this hardship disproportionately.
Right.
Yes.
And, watching the trailer, that's one of the things I keyed in on. And I think you hit an important point that does not get enough attention. And we've been blowing this trumpet for 2 years now, and that it wasn't COVID that caused supply chain issues and economic issues. It was the government response that did all of the damage. And we've seen studies where teenage suicides went up, education's gone down, like everything was all as a result of these government mandates. And you key in on that when it does not get enough attention. And we need to be squarely putting the attention where it belongs.
Exactly.
So the film, I think, is going to be a revelation to most people, because we start at the beginning in 2019 when the virus appeared in Wuhan, China, and that's when the politics started setting in. Nothing in the film hasn't been seen before or said before, but what we do is we take it all. We look at all of the evidence right from the beginning, right to the present day. And the film is not trying to say, this was the better way, that was the wrong way. And we didn't want to be criticized for not showing the other side. We lived through the other side. So what the film is doing is it takes the angle of the suppression of science. What happens when you've got these medical doctors who are being demonized, who are being taken down on Twitter, like the Biden administration that is telling Twitter, Facebook, where you've got the FBI and Twitter telling Twitter who to take down.
Yes.
To minimize. That's a violation of the First Amendment.
Right.
And we have that court case that just went to the Supreme Court, Missouri versus Biden. This is all part of the suppression of science. And who pays? Well, people die. And the public has a right to know facts. They have a right to an intelligent public discussion. If the government is going to mandate something, there has to be a reason. And what we found, and what this film will reveal, especially since a lot of this information, a lot of these secret emails where you had Dr. Fauci collaborating with his team saying, we've got to take this guy down, or we've got to minimize the influence of these people. That came out when Elon Musk purchased Twitter.
Yes.
And he had a number of leading journalists come in and curate these emails. So these emails were released. Now, the general public is not going to go hunting all of this stuff down. But the Senate, in Washington over the last year or so, the Senate subcommittee for the Senate subcommittee, I forget the formal title, for the investigation of COVID, had the leading scientists that were involved in these emails. They had them on the hot seat, and this committee had some damning things to say about the suppression of dissenting views. It basically said, "Hey, you guys, Fauci and Dr. Francis, you got caught. You got caught."
And the funny thing is, not only did they censor, experts in these fields, but they censored everybody. I started talking about Facebook jail, and people were laughing at me. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. And I'm like, really? See if I can post anything, because I can't, right? So not only were they screening and censoring the people in the know, they were screening and censoring just moms and dads talking about it and the effects it was having on them and their families and their jobs and, their finances. They were censoring everybody, which was crazy because we've never seen this kind of censorship ever. And it's still going on to this day.
Right.
Absolutely.
Do you remember when the doctor stood up in front of Capitol Hill and they all got together and they say, we're all using ivermectin and ivermectin works. Some of them said, no, hydroxychloroquine works as well. But it was about 40 of them that stood on the steps, and they got censored and they got crushed. And what was it last month? Last month, FDA comes out, or CDC comes out and says, you can use ivermectin. That's okay.
Chris, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the important parts of our film, where we have an expert, Dr. Paul Merrick, who had promoted the use of ivermectin as, for early COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know that Donald Trump was given hydroxychloroquine.
He announced it. We have a videotape of him announcing that he used it, and it worked.
Yeah.
And then it gets outlawed.
But what we cover in our film is that there, and we'll cover this in our panel at the screening. But what we do cover is the suppression of early treatment drugs such as ivermectin and the demonization of these drugs. And a lot of doctors worldwide had been using these drugs, and it just takes down that viral load in early stages. I mean, no one is claiming that these will cure COVID, but what they're saying is that there's a combination of things that will help take it down. And these are, and I know that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are supposedly extremely safe drugs, like safer than Tylenol.
Yeah.
And the FDA, the FDA outlined an entire campaign, an anti-ivermectin campaign.
Yes.
We all saw it all over CNN, all over. You had these wild stories of people taking a horse ivermectin, and there was all sorts of weird stories promoted. Well, a number of scientists in our film say, well, the FDA did that to make room for the vaccine.
Yes.
Correct.
Because unless if there are other alternatives in place for COVID, there is you can't get the vaccine. You can't get the vaccine pushed through.
Yeah. So here's a question, and maybe you can answer it. I don't know if anybody's actually looked into this yet, but the FDA has now come out, as Chris said, and said, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, they are good alternatives. They are working. And we know that the shots were emergency authorized only. And if there was another alternative, those shots had to be pulled back. But I haven't seen the shots pulled back after the FDA made this announcement that there is other alternatives. And in fact, our government just announced, that we're going to need more shots and get your shots. But if they're only emergency authorized, and we've now got an alternative, that means they should have lost their emergency authorized usage label and should have been pulled back and no longer be allowed to use, because they are still in experimental phases.
I think once the vaccine is out there, it's out there. And I'm not talking about as an expert here, but I think it's just common sense that once the shot is out there,
it doesn't get pulled back.
It's not going to get pulled back unless there's some, I mean, we all know about vaccine injuries, but I think Big Pharma is still being protected,
right?
In its drive to get the vaccines out there.
Agreed. We put the Pfizer contract together with the Canadian Pfizer contract was heavily redacted. So we took the contract from several other countries, compared them, and unredacted it basically, and put it back together. And what that contract showed, and this part, it wasn't even unredacted, or wasn't even redacted, that they say right in the contract, we can't guarantee efficacy, we can't guarantee safety. And they went ahead and signed it anyway, and then kept on saying safe and effective, safe and effective. It says right in the contract they signed that it wasn't. We put that out there and it just felt like a lead balloon. Like it should be the biggest news of the day, and it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think, Chris, I think the mainstream media bears a tremendous responsibility.
Yes.
For promoting, for not allowing alternative views to be aired. And I'm not talking about fringe views. I'm talking about highly qualified people. And I think that was one of the problems with the lockdowns was was that the media was actually pushing lockdowns. The media was not standing by waiting. Once the Chinese Communist Party shut down Wuhan and claimed that after a month, look, the virus is gone. We did it. The virus is gone. Come and see, delegates from UK, US. Come, everyone.
Yeah.
Come and see. This is what we've done. And of course, our naive media runs these headlines. China's got it right. China is leading the way. America is lagging behind. We should be shutting down. This is New York Times, Washington Post.
Yep.
All the major media outlets were, who are essentially very left, went on the pro-China bandwagon.
Yeah.
These are supposed to be experienced journalists. They should know you do not trust any evidence coming out of China. Well, to us right from the get-go, right from 2019.
But they're contradicting their own stories. You look at like masks, for example. The only reason masks worked was because of the droplet theory. The droplets are too big to go through the masks, so therefore masks work. In January of 2021, TAM came out publicly and said, well, it's an aerosol. And so they all reported it, contradicting. So no, that just rendered the masks useless. And then you had TAM saying, well, we can't use ivermectin because I'm not going to use an untested drug on this. And then a week later, she was talking about testing this new drug that had just come out of the pharmaceutical labs, right? So they're all there. All those things are there. Media's not reporting on it. We know why. But the biggest thing is, having done 3 documentaries on the brain, what's your take on the cognitive dissonance, or the not wanting to know the truth even though it's there?
I think to be fair to most people, I think COVID scared people very deeply. People that I knew and I thought of as rather courageous, gutsy people locked themselves down. I think all of us witnessed that, and I think fear does strange things to us. I think we cease to think rationally. Our brains will not listen to data. It won't listen to facts if it is motivated. If fear is present.
Mm-hmm.
I think it disables our rational brain.
And again, that's where our media comes in. It was fear porn 24/7. You could not escape it. Mm-hmm. So you're right. If your brain is constantly surrounded by fear, you're not going to take in fact. And we all knew that ivermectin was a Nobel Prize winning drug out since the 1960s, clearly tested, clearly safe. And yet people would not hear it. They completely refused to hear it. And this was my big thing. We all have eyes. And ears. Do you hear the sirens going 24/7? No. Is the lady who serves you coffee in the morning still serving you coffee? Yes. Are the grocery store clerks still alive? Yes. Wait a minute. Are the doctors still alive? Yes. Are the nurses still alive? Yes. Paramedics still alive? Yes. Police still alive? Yes. I'm going, how do people not see this? clearly they're lying because everybody's still alive and the sirens are not going 24/7. Clearly not a pandemic. Clearly just a horrible flu that most people have survived quite well, quite easily. And if they did start anything, any antibiotics or whatever early, then it lasted a couple days. Or if they did their chicken soup and, mom's old wives' tale solutions, they came through it pretty darn fast. And yet people did not trust their eyes and ears. And I kept saying, if you're deaf or blind, I get it. I get it, because all you've got now is senses that you can't see and hear.
But then you wouldn't be hearing the fear messages all the time either. So
right, true enough. But they'd be reading it Braille. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right, Jody. And what you just reminded me of was that very early on, this is why I became very suspicious of the science behind lockdowns, and that was people were convinced, that it seemed that if you shopped at your local hardware store, which was local businesses were shut down while big box stores were thriving. Yep. So it seems, so the message was, if you go into your local hardware store, you're going to get COVID. But if you go into your big box store, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So you had all of your local businesses going bankrupt, shutting down, but somehow it was safe to go into the big box stores, to go into your Costco's and your Sam's and your Walmarts. And I don't think people saw anyone dropping dead in those stores.
No.
Right. So before all this COVID stuff, we knew before this came down that two things, government lies and pharmaceutical companies lie. I mean, they've been caught and sued and fined. So we knew those things. But after this happened, it was like, they don't lie. They are the only purveyors of the truth. Any other person who claims otherwise is misinformation, disinformation. So before all of this witchcraft started in 2020, were you kind of awake to the government? Did you have you were skirting that issue of getting called conspiracy theorist, but there's a lot of things out there that we could hold the government task to. Was this stuff that you just didn't watch, didn't care about, are you aware and just didn't report on it, or picking your battles kind of thing?
So I'm not sure what your question is. Was I aware before the lockdowns?
I'm trying to word it in a way that it skirts away from this conspiracy issue stuff. And so I'm not sure what my question is either honestly.
Have you always trusted the government or always questioned the government?
Was this a wake-up call for you in 2020 is really the basic?
I think so. I mean, I, like everyone else, was a rather compliant Canadian. We trust in our institutions. I trust my doctor. We as a nation trust our experts because overall Canada works.
Right.
The U.S. works. We have institutions that are there to guide us, whether there are tax institutions or medical education. We trust these people. I think during the time of COVID, when we saw that there was a great deal of lying, I think many people, myself included, have lost trust in our institutions, have lost trust that our institutions are there to serve the public good.
I agree.
That is the most deeply disturbing thing.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Is that, and someone in our film, we didn't include this in the film, but one of our experts, Bill Shadwick, who's a great mathematician and the lead founder of the Fields Institute of Mathematics, which is like God in mathematics. He said, there are no trusted institutions anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a profound statement.
And Scott Atlas in our film says, the people that you trust to be knowledgeable are not.
Yeah, it blew those doors wide open for everybody. And I know I was someone, I didn't like going to the doctors, and I rarely ever went to the doctors anyway. But now I have zero trust in the doctors. And every time a doctor or even a veterinarian says anything to me, I'm not going home and I'm doing my own research. And a lot of times I'm finding stuff that's better than what they said in a natural way. And I am discounting or discrediting everything they say now, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? Yeah.
So you said they were afraid of COVID. Do you think there's a greater fear in waking up to not being able to trust those institutions?
Yeah, I do. I think people are going to have a hard time, and some people just won't wake up at all. I think people need to cling.
Yeah.
They need to cling to the things that they trusted. And I don't think one film is, I think one film may start them questioning, but I think a lot of people, they are not going to be open if it is too threatening to their you know, the thoughts that they've always had. If it threatens the status quo,
right?
If it threatens their belief system, I think they're going to have problems.
Agreed. So that, again, COVID Collateral is just one of many films. I didn't put this up. You can go to Matter of Fact Media, by the way, and you can go see all of Vanessa's films. You can purchase them there. As far as I know, it looks like you can purchase them there.
Yes.
Great. So there's many things there. The Brain series I'm actually really keenly interested on. So you can go there. And then we just wanted to also highlight, this is the creative team. I'm so jealous. You have a whole team working with you.
It's just Chris and I and Michael Chuchong here.
Right.
So
well, yes, the team has been with the project not for a full 2 years. Some people have come on first, then left. Other people have come on later. But certainly I could not have done this without Marcus Valentin, the co-director and the editor, because he actually, at a certain point, the film became so difficult about 8-9 months ago that I looked at it and I thought, I have to do this on my own. I have to restructure this entire film because it's an extremely dense. It's dense. There's a lot of stuff happening in the film, but it's got to be logical. It's got to be cogent. You have to follow. Yep. You have to follow it. And I had a good team. I did not have as much help as I normally would have liked. Because of budget reasons. We didn't have a big budget. And this is one of the reasons for this screening at the Isabel Bader Theater is we're hoping to, this is a fundraiser for the film. And it will be, and this again is the first public screening of the film. And it will become available eventually on my own website, but also I'm trying to find a U.S. buyer right now. The Canadian broadcaster that actually did come on board is New Tang Dynasty.
Okay.
And they came on, and then we've got Canada Media Fund financing in the film. So that is that's a bit of a shocker. We've got Canadian funding in the film. But the broadcaster was very good. They approved of the storylines, and interestingly enough, the commissioner there at New Tang Dynasty is actually a doctor, a vaccinologist.
Oh,
wow.
Okay. And he had worked on the first SARS vaccine.
Wow.
And
Okay.
he knew a lot of the underbelly of the corruption of science during COVID. And that's why he came on board.
That's
Good on him.
amazing. And even the Isabella Bader Theater taking you on, because I know I'm trying to put together a tour for Todd Michael Harris with regards to pharmaceuticals. And I am just hitting a brick wall at every theater I call. So when Michelle Leduc told me you guys are in the Bader Theater, I'm like, what? How?
Yeah.
It was, I'll tell you, it was not easy. And they had to vet me 9 to 10 different ways.
Wow.
Incredible. But your persistence.
And they also asked for security guards.
Oh, okay. Wow. I don't know if you'll get the pushback at this point, because like we're saying, we're getting that melting edges, right?
I think it would be. I think it's fine, but I'll tell you a quick side story. 4 years ago, I had a screening of my film, The Divided Brain. This is just a big science film about how the two sides of the brain talk to each other and what it really means for us, the real story. Jordan Peterson was one of my panelists at this. This was in the day when he was super notorious.
Yep.
Starting his tour. He agreed to come on the panel with Dr. Norman Doidge, who's a big brain doctor. And so that draw meant that, we had to actually keep it quiet, because I could not get a publicist to publicize the screening because it was Jordan Peterson.
Right.
Right.
There was so much anti-Peterson flack, and the Bader Theater said, we want security guards.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's gender ideology, and that's a lot more incendiary, and that's where he's kind of planted right in the middle of that. But let's talk about your event.
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. So this is the sneak preview, and we've got 4 really great panelists after the screening. So
yeah, Dr. Roshane Killian, Dr. Jennifer Hibbard. I know them both very well, and Bruce Party, know him very well as well. I've been lucky enough to break bread with all of them and speak on the same stage as Dr. Killian. They are fantastic. Yep. And Dr. Roshane Killian has really taken it on the chin for the COVID protocols and stepping out. Like, she is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, Rodney Palmer, who is amazing, and he's finally championing all the stuff that was going on in the media. So this is a really great panel, actually.
It is. So we're trying to spread the word far and wide, and hope that we can pack that theater, because this is going to be, people are going to be shocked, I think, once they watch the film. And it's going to be supported by an amazing panel. So it's going to be a very eventful evening. So I hope people will come.
Right. And you've got that Q&A at the end. And Jody and I did a 3-day conference with an incredible lineup of speakers. But also after we had some time where people could actually go into a room, and it was a small audience, and they got to go from room to room to room and talk to the speakers. And we found that was by far the most sought after portion of the event.
Yeah.
So Q&A, getting to talk to these speakers directly and get to ask them questions directly. I mean, that in itself is incredible. The VIP reception is great, but there's so many people and there's so much divided time that it's harder to get your questions in. So I'm glad that you're allowing for all of this time, because people can actually speak to them and pick their brains, and that's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We hope, I hope this will be a well attended evening.
Yeah, I think if it's not, then it's people's loss. But, I think just what the film is about and how you're presenting it. And then you've got these incredible speakers that are highly regarded in their fields. I think you're going to be sold out, and I think there's going to be a lot of disappointed people standing on the street, sad that they didn't get their ticket, or waiting for somebody not to show up so they can take their seat.
Right.
Oh, I'm hoping, Jody, I'm hoping that's the case.
Well, as we've mentioned, you can go get tickets over at COVID Collateral. Jody and I have been fortunate enough to have
We've secured our seats.
Yeah, so we're super excited ourselves because we love, honestly, Vanessa, we love good media. If you're going to do it well, do it. If you're going to do it well. But I love documentaries that aren't about opinion. They really are just letting the facts speak for themselves. And there's so many facts out there, and some of the angles that I can tell you've already taken. I'm super excited about a lot of the points that you've hit here. So
yeah, and you have a lot of bigwigs in your film, like.
Yeah.
We went on the COVID Collateral website, and you've got these main characters: Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, Dr. Scott Atlas, Canadian MP Roman Baber. I was surprised to see him there, and I've had the fortune of also having breaking bread with him many times and having many conversations with him. And he was one of the first politicians. Him and Randy Hillier were one of the first politicians to speak up, and both of them got booted from their own party for having a voice and representing their constituents' concerns.
Absolutely. His testimony or his interview in our film is heartrending. It really is. When he talks about the damage of lockdowns to his neighborhood, and he. And so his interview is really, really moving, and again, he was one of these people who, because he simply shared his observations of what was happening to his constituents, because he was booted out. So that's an important part, and. Janine Eunice is a fantastic interviewee. She's amazing. She's going to be on a panel in Washington. Once we screen the film in Washington, that is going to be a huge event.
Amazing.
Oh, yes.
Amazing.
And we'll have some of the senators there, but she is very plain speaking about what the issues are and about what happened with the Biden administration and how they overstepped themselves, and how the FBI was basically telling Twitter what to do and what not to do, who to censor, who to take down. And that's pretty shocking. And Michael Senger, who's a San Francisco lawyer and who wrote the book Snake Oil: How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World, he is the China critic and saying, why did we do this? Why were we being pressured by China? How could this have happened? Really, we're going to shut down because China shut down, and
when has China ever been the world leading example that us Western society democracies have ever followed?
Right.
I know, but so we do go into the pressure from China in the film, and we also look at a very important fact, that is, North America and Europe had a pandemic plan in place before COVID happened. Yes. There were rules as to here's what you do if a pandemic happens. Why did we have it in place? Because for decades, our scientists knew that a pandemic was going to come. We were overdue. Our last one was in 1918, and that one decimated entire families. It was far more deadly, than COVID. Yeah. We didn't shut down entire societies. No. So the pandemic plan that was in place, and we go through this in the film, Scott Atlas says, 2006, pandemic plan was here. It was put in place by the scientist, et cetera, and what it said was no lockdowns because lockdowns are harmful. They cause social disruption, bankruptcies. Children should be in school, et cetera. We had that plan, but there were two major things that caused this lockdown, and one was pressure from China,
right,
to follow their lead, and the other thing was the incompetence around numbers.
Mhm. Yes.
So out of the Imperial College of London, which is one of these places with historically a high reputation, come these modelers, and these modelers, and such as Neil Ferguson, were busy modeling how many people would die if we didn't shut down.
right.
Well, this came and this went worldwide. His chart showed that in the US itself, 2 million people were going to die in a few months if we didn't shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
His number was off the charts.
Yep.
Later, he apologized, saying they realized that they were wrong, that the numbers were wrong, but that he didn't expect that public policy was going to be based on his research.
Right.
Now, the film says, who are we going to trust then?
Exactly.
Right. There's so many examples of that. You know, the one thing I like about your roster of voices that you've got in your film is it's not the same old cast of characters. It's a whole bunch. I know they're in the media, but it's not Malone and McCullough and Cole.
And,
it's new. It's new it's not the same old, right? So I'm looking forward to it for that alone, you know.
Fantastic. We had to be very, because I wanted to stay very center.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that we could not be accused of having anyone who was fringe or anything. Not that Dr. McCullough is fringe, but we had to be really careful and just pick the most distinguished people in their fields who actually had the experience, who were shut down, but they were actually in the part of the entire COVID saga. They were in the eye of the storm. Scott Atlas was there. He was appointed by Trump as the special advisor to the coronavirus task force. Why was he appointed? Because he was the guy out there, but the really prominent guy, the public health scholar, who was saying, we shouldn't be locking down. We have a pandemic plan in place.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
How many, like in those pandemic response task force, I believe they meet every 4 years to go over if there's a new pandemic, if there's new technology, if. But it's not just doctors and scientists, but it's people in the top of their fields in all aspects of society. So they're not just looking at one angle. They're literally looking at all angles of the box and playing devil's advocate. Well, what if this? Well, what if that? How does it affect, the housing market, the children, the education, the health, the science, the economy? And that's the whole point of the task force. Whereas when they decided to ignore these task forces that meet on a very regular basis and do their own thing and only look at it from, like you said earlier, the health perspective, where the whole thing is about keeping people alive, but without understanding that in order to keep people alive, you have to look at the family and at housing and at economics and business. You have to look at everything, because all of those things are part of the mindset to keep people healthy and keep people alive and keep people functioning. And if people no longer have purpose, they do die. They fall into depressions and they fall into horrible habits and they die. And they die not because of the thing that you were trying to keep them alive from, but they die because society has taken away their purpose and destiny in life.
That's a very intelligent point that you're making. And Scott Atlas, in his book about his experience in the White House, made exactly that point, that once he went into the White House, what shocked him was that in the coronavirus task force, you did not have other people. You did not have the economists. You did not have the social scientists. You did not have the other people looking at what is this going to cost society?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What is the risk-benefit ratio? And he said that wasn't done. He said you had an entrenched and ossified bureaucracy of people who had been there 30 years. And he said, I used to come in, I used to show the data, because he had minute-to-minute data coming in from experts all over the world. He said, I would show the data, and he said, and they would turn to me and say, you're a fringe. He actually says this in the film. We had legally, I mean, this film has been lawyered up and down, which is why we're over budget, but this went through, because if you're in the kind of business I am, where you're putting out films that broadcasters actually have to broadcast, and serious broadcasters will buy, it means you have to have insurance.
Yeah.
And that insurance can only be gotten if you have a big a fat lawyer's a fat good legal opinion from a lawyer. And we sent this to a law firm in California that is known for being pretty rigorous, and they had 30 points in our film, and they said, what's the backup, ladies and gentlemen? So we trudged all of the research to them, and we were left with about 3 points that we had to compromise on.
Wow. Amazing.
So, yeah, but there were people in the film that said pretty inflammatory things, and I thought, whoa, can't put that in the film, would like to keep it.
Yeah.
Interesting conversations, but and when we have one person in our film too who's fantastic is Jeffrey Tucker, rather Paul Thacker. Thacker is a big investigative journalist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's worked for the White House. He's worked for the Senate investigating corrupt relationships within the United States between Big Pharma and the US government. He knows where all the deepest graves are.
Wow.
And so we've got him as part of this, and he basically...
It's good.
Yeah.
That's good. It's funny because I've been saying, we've kind of sung your praises already on this stuff, but the lies in the media has made it that everybody wants to jump in and counter those lies with their obvious response to a lying mainstream media that it seems to be united force now. Instead of trying to scoop the stories, they're all trying to say the same thing. When that collapses, and it will soon, nobody will be trusting any of them anymore. That's going to come apart. So we need people who are very diligent about their facts and not just stating opinion. And so I'm glad that you're doing that. We're starting an initiative called Authentic Media. And one of the biggest precepts is it doesn't matter who the lies are coming from. It needs to be exposed, but you need to back it up with facts, not just your opinion, right? It's super important. So I'm seeing that from this, and we have a lack of good documentarians and journalists on the truth, freedom movement side, whatever you want to call it. So I'm glad that you're setting yet another stage, like Todd, like our good friend Todd, where truth first and opinion second matters, right? So thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you today.
We have been so excited to have you on, and
Yes.
just going through your bio, you're like one of our most amazing guests so far. And you filled the hour like a pro.
Thank you.
And I know you said that you're not used to the hour-long interviews, but there was no lag. This was not boring at all. So,
thank you.
So looking forward to meeting you in person and shaking your hand, premiere, and hearing what your panel discussion is going to say, especially knowing these people in a social setting, but to see them in a professional setting and how they're going to deal with your fact-featured film is I'm so excited.
Me too. So we'll just bring this up really quickly again. One night only, Thursday, May 9th. You get the VIP reception, the introduction and the screening, the very first premiere screening of COVID Collateral, and then speakers discussion, our Q&A afterwards. You can go to covidcollateral.com. Let me bring that up just so you've got it. There we go. So you can go there and you can get tickets and you can see the trailer and you get more information there. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming on. We are so excited for this premiere, and I guess we'll see you in May.
Yay.
All right, everybody.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with you both.
You too. Yes. And I hope when your film is a great success and you've won some awards, you'll come back on and talk about it again.
Absolutely. You've got it.
Okay,
Thank you, Vanessa.
great.
Appreciate that.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Bye now.